Namaste, Dr. Bajaj. Welcome to Atharva Forum. Dr. Bajaj, you are known for your scientific and technological know-how in Indian society, economy, and polity. But this afternoon, we would like to focus on your seminal work, Annam Bahu Kurvita, which you have co-authored with Professor M.D. Srinivas. At the beginning, I would like you to tell us, within the context of the book Annam Bahu Kurvita, the concept of Sanatana within it.
Although it's a bit odd that we are talking about this great discipline of producing a plenty and sharing plentifully, the discipline of ensuring that everyone is well fed and taken care of at all times, at a time when we seem to have somewhat failed in fulfilling this duty to a large number of our countrymen at the time of this pandemic. If we were following the discipline of Annam Bahu Kurvita, as we have tried to describe, I don't think a society ever gets into this kind of position where there are large numbers visibly seen on the roads. The discipline can be stated very simply. It means that any grihastha, which means every economically active actor in the society, must ensure before he and his wife, the dampati, sit down to partake of food. Before they do that, they must ensure that every created being within their knowledge and responsibility has been satiated. So what the text will say that when you eat after having taken care of everybody else, when you eat what is left over after feeding others, then you're eating vigasa, then you're eating amrita. And when you eat without having shared, then you're eating in sin. That's the kind of language used in this text. This discipline is stated in different ways, several ways. But it is Sanatana not only because it's stated in the Indian classical texts with great intensity. It is Sanatana discipline because amongst the ordinary Indian people, this is imprinted on their consciousness, on their minds very deeply. I remember my mother, whenever she sat down to cook food for us, when she started making rotis, first there'll be a share taken for the cow, then there'll be another share taken for the insects, then the share taken for the dog, then there'll be a share taken for the Gurdwara, then there'll be a share for the sweeper woman who came. And only after all those shares were separated and kept or delivered to the recipient, only after that the children got any food. And this was not too long ago. This was when we were young. In fact, when we wrote this book, Annam Bahu Kurvita, one of our young colleagues in the IIT, he was not colleague, he was a younger student. He showed it to his grandfather. And he told him, son, you don't remember anything. But when we were young and we were in the village, in the evenings we used to go and stand near the bus stand and hope that some visitor comes to the village to partake of our dinner. And the day we couldn't get a visitor, we couldn't eat. So this was the kind of sin, because it is imprinted so strongly on the minds of Indian people. That's what makes it Sanatana. That's what makes it permanent. It makes it timeless. And it is true that to an extent the Indians have forgotten the discipline in recent times. Perhaps not many younger Grihasthas will know the importance of sharing before eating. But that, I think, is temporary. But what is imprinted on our minds is timeless, and which will come back again. That's what is Sanatana about this. I could go on unless.
No, I would like you to ask you in the context of, today when I see, say, the urban poor, I find it difficult to understand that within their lack of resource, how could they have that sort of attitude? But the fact is that you mentioned that scarcity of food was something that has not been recorded in our history for the longest time. And there is no mention of famine. There is always a mention of abundance. Could you situate this practice that we had in the context of the fact that India grew in abundance and India had abundance?
I'll come back to this question. Let me, this is important, so we'll come back to it.
Okay.
Let me, this Sanatana part, let me tell you what the texts say.
Okay.
The texts are define the discipline in very many different ways. I don't think there's any classical text of Indian civilization which doesn't refer to this. Refer to the inviolable discipline that you do not tolerate hunger of others. That dharma begins with it, it ends with it. You just cannot claim to be any kind of a disciplined person if you are willing to tolerate the hunger of others. The best way it is defined, to my mind, is, and the simplest way, is in the Bhagavad Gita. It's the 3rd chapter, there are the 7 verses. And it's called the Karma Yoga. And in those 7 verses, Lord Sri Krishna is telling Partha that this creation has been created, has been made by me as a cycle of give and take. That when you take something, you are taking it from all other aspects of creation. And unless you return to, before taking, unless you give back, then what you are taking is theft. The one who does this, the term uses stain evasa, he is like a thief. And then he says that I have created this cycle. And those who do not act in a way to keep the cycle moving, their living is a waste. Their life is a waste. They are only immersed in their sense perceptions, and it's no use that they are here on earth. So that is the kind of insistence that these texts have. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi, I remember in 1927, he went to South India, and he gave many lectures to many students. In Madurai, he's talking to the students in high school. He tells them that if you have not read Gita yet, go back today and buy Gita. And if you know Sanskrit, get in Sanskrit. If you do not know Sanskrit, get it translated for yourself. And when you buy this text, go and first of all read these 7 verses, this 3rd chapter of Gita. because that is what tells you what being human is. So I think I'll come back to the question that you have raised, that obviously the such sharing, such insistence on ensuring that everyone's hunger is satiated cannot be fulfilled unless there's sufficient production. That's why the Taittiriya Upanishad will say, Annam Bahu Kurvita, that multiply food several times. Tadvratam. That's the inviolable discipline of mankind. And then after that it says, Na kanchana vastu pratyachakshita. Do not let anybody standing on your door seeking from you go empty-handed. So you have to have plenty of food in order to ensure that it's plentifully distributed, plentifully shared. And this is, I think, one of the surprising things about India. We all have always read that India is an agricultural country, the Krishi Pradhan Desh. And if it's Krishi Pradhan, obviously it must be doing good agriculture. And from the time of when anybody who has come to India has appreciated the kind of agriculture that India does in every part of this land. And yet, from the time of our consciousness, we have been a scarce country. In fact, we looked at in quite some detail on the agricultural production of late 18th century in a region which is in your neighborhood, in the Chankalpet district of Chennai. And last week, actually, I was working out in detail what was the productivity of a single village in that area, a particular village in that area. And that productivity, the records that I have, it records that in 1762, on so much land, these crops were grown, and this was the produce. And this says 1762 this happened, 1763 was this. So for that 5 years, systematically, it gives the land area under different crops and the produce of the crops. And you know what is the productivity this area is talking about? In 1762, they are getting, on the average, one of these years was very bad. 1.5 years was very bad. Even then, they're getting a productivity of more than 4 tons per hectare. And since you do some agriculture, you will know what this means. This is just not easy. And for a particular paddy, the car paddy, the summer paddy, the productivity is going to the level of 6 tons per hectare. In the best years, actually, they have produced something like 7 tons on a hectare. So today, our average productivity will be somewhere between 2 to 2.5 tons. That's the kind of difference we have of the level. In fact, if instead of 2.5, we were producing about 3 or 3.5, we will not be a scarce country anymore. So there was immense productivity, recorded productivity in up to the late 18th century. And Changalpet is not Ganga Valley.
That's true.
Changalpet, of course, is a coastal area sloping down. And it's not the fertility that you will expect in, say, Allahabad. It will be 800 kilograms per person per year. Today, our average is 200 kilograms per person per year. And this 200 kilograms per person per year is a figure which has become almost a physical constant with us. You calculate what was produced per capita in 1950, you calculate what was produced in 1960, what was produced in 1970, what is produced today, it always turns out the same figure of 200 kilograms per capita per person. And Green Revolution has made no difference to it. And all the great efforts we have put have ensured that as our population has increased, so has production increased correspondingly to ensure that we keep getting the same 200 kilogram per capita per year. Today we'll be producing about 280 million tons for about 140, 135 million people, 135 million. Today our population should be around that. We'll be producing about 170 to 180 million tons. So anytime you go, it will come to the same number of 200 kg. And then we look from where is this number of 200 kg coming? Why is it such a constant in Indian polity? And we found that in the 1880s, there was a famine commission set up. And the famine commission gave this number. It said that to ensure that there is no frank death from hunger in an area affected by famine, the administration must ensure that 200 kg per capita reaches there. So this number was meant to be a famine level number. It was meant to ensure that deaths do not occur because of hunger in the case of famine. Somehow we have not been somehow we are not been able to take the situation seriously. And we have, when we wrote this book, we also held a seminar in the Parliament of Senexi on this issue. And almost the entire high political leadership of India was present. Pranab Mukherjee was there, Chandrasekhar ji was there, Advani ji was there, Vajpayee ji was there. And we presented these numbers to them, told them that this kind of production leads to scarcity, leads to hunger, and that's why we keep getting, whenever there is, wherever in the world there's a compilation made of the number of hungry or the number of malnutrition, number of people affected by anemia, India comes fairly high in that list.
That's true.
At the end of the day, Advani ji said that we have heard very serious things today. And if we, this is not a like usual seminar that we have attended, having heard and seen the figures, if we go out and do nothing about it, then it will be criminal on our part. Something like that, he said. In fact, I have recorded it. But actually nothing got done. And Chandrasekhar ji came and told me his wife was unwell that time. She, I think, died around the same time, a few days back, later. And he came and told me that for this purpose, anything you want to do, I will be leading it. But somehow things do not change in India on this particular front, partly and perhaps largely because amongst the economists of India, there is some consensus that production more than this will not be appropriate for India. I don't know where this idea comes from. We can discuss it. But we have never taken it beyond that number. We have just refused to take. Even now, when we are talking so much about increasing the income of farmers, you would have noticed that it has never said we'll increase production. It's always said we'll increase income.
Yes.
So, which will mean we will make them do activities other than actual production of food grains or other crops. But we'll discuss it further.
Yes. So as you have mentioned that not only were we a land of abundance, and just stating is not enough. There is enough eyewitness proof of travelers who have recorded this in their journeys that India was indeed a land of abundance. And you also give us a date from the time in which the slip started to happen. So could you attribute a moment in time and the people responsible for this drop in productivity and production? And could you take this question at two levels? One is that we had robust agricultural practices. So what happened to that, the example you gave with Chengalpet? If you could produce that much per hectare, why is it down to so little? And second is, in terms of human attitude, what did this change do to the way Indians looked at food, shared food, cared about others and all? If you could answer this question twofold.
Okay. I'll take the first part first.
Yes.
It is difficult to answer the question universally for India. India is a very big country. But we know that particular region, Chengalpet, and we largely know what happened there. That particular region, Chengalpet, the production there was based on what is called the ARI system there. There are tanks for collecting water. As I said, it is a slopy land. There's sufficient rain, but the rain left to itself would have just flown into the sea, because right on the sea, there's a slope towards the sea. So what they have done is to put what are called one-side bunds. 3 sides open, one side bund they have created at every physically appropriate place. So the water stops there, and the overflow of one area goes to the next, and the one of the other goes to the next. So it's an interconnected network system of detaining water before it flows to the sea. And much of the paddy production there was dependent on this system of ARIs. And since it is such a complicated system, one is connected with the other, the next is connected with the other. So if any one of it breaks in the way, the whole system gets affected.
Correct.
So for that purpose, from what we know of the political economy before the coming of the British there was a system of assigning resources, assigning part of the produce for taking care of various functions, including this system of water tanks that existed. And that was considerable amount which was spent. And incidentally, the people who were responsible for distributing water out of these areas to different fields were almost always from what we call today the scheduled caste people. They were the ones who opened the sluices and closed the sluices and decided who will get how much where. When the British administration was established there, which will be, I think, just the end of 18th century, around 1895, 1890, the first British district collector came to Chengalpet. He was the first British district collector, Learnell Place. And he looked at this survey that had been done by the British to what was the production and what was the revenue collected. And he said that all these allocations they are making for different functions, including for irrigation, are obviously the function of the state and not of the village. So the village must give all this to us, and then we'll decide how much to give for what function. So all this, in fact, all these the servants who looked after the irrigation and other people of the village establishment, he wrote in his report that they must first be dismissed from the service of the village. And then they must be reappointed, if necessary, as servants of the British administration.
You know, in terms of the British, the influencing how we behave and our attitude towards food and sharing. On one level, they destroyed the irrigation. On the other level, they actually destroyed our habits too. So that was the two parts I tried to ask.
Okay. These habits that you're talking about, they were very widespread, and they were, it seemed, hardwired into us. And even the kings of the region and the British had a great problem that these people, these kings, keep on spending so much on what they call useless charities. In fact, one of the best examples of this is this Raja of Tanjore, who was deposed in 1799. And the British took over the administration of. He's, after being deposed, is writing a letter to the British, and he's saying that of the various things that we have been doing, one of the most important is the various chatrams that we have been running. My Rajya is situated in a place where the pilgrims going to Rameshwaram pass through it, various other rituals. So we have established various chatram. Chatram in Tamil are the places where people can get food and shelter. Pilgrims can food. And then it's giving the details of what is done in this chatram. And I'll not go into the whole, but what he's saying is that from up to midnight we keep serving. He's saying rice. What he means is sapat. That up to the midnight we keep serving food, and at midnight when the service is about to close, we ring a bell, asking people if somebody has yet not been partaken of the food to please come and eat. And then he says that those who are staying in the chatram, the pilgrims, they are provided various facilities, including if they fall sick, we take care of their health. And then he says if somebody dies there, then his children become our responsibility. We take care of those children till they reach the stage of maturity. So keeps on describing what we do. And he says that because we do all this, that is why Tanjavur is known as Dharmarajya in the world. And my only request to you is, please do not take away the monies allocated for these purposes. Do not take away the lands allocated for this purpose. You do whatever you like. And he's also saying that these chatrams are the particular responsibility of the queens of Tanjavur to take care of. But of course, all this goes. In fact, all those names are still there. If you go to that area, those beautiful chatram names, village after village you get. But of course, no food is served there anymore. So the British.
What purpose did it? That's exactly. What purpose did it serve the British to literally dismantle the system? What is it that they wanted to establish? One is they had to dismantle.
One is that they thought it's just too much of a strain on the revenue. That this is wasteful charity, and the revenue cannot afford it. That's one of the purposes. But the other was that they were perhaps morally were not happy with the idea that something is given to somebody for free. There should be no free lunches anywhere. Is an older proposition that they have. And so they throughout take away all these allocations, all whatever is allocated from revenue. for this kind of purposes. But they also make the idea of charity, in fact, charity is the wrong word for what
Yes.
people do in terms of giving food to people. In fact, there's nothing charitable about it. It is supposed to be a human duty, as we have used, is the inviolable discipline of assuring that this goes to everybody, that the food reaches everybody. And charity will be something which you do out of your free will. There's no voluntarism involved in this. This is compulsory, this is essential, this is inviolable that you do it. So if you want to term the philosophical terms, it is not a moral duty, it is not a philanthropic duty. For Indians, it was meant to be an ontological duty. It is what is associated with your sense of being that you do this. So any case, so they said that that giving anything free without taking work in return is immoral. So the Famine Commission actually writes that no dole should be given, and where in a situation of famine, people do not have food, they may be given food sufficient to maintain them for the day after expecting a full day's work from them. Okay. And only in cases when somebody has become so weak that he cannot do the full day, he or she cannot do the full day's work, then after our medical inspectors having examined the person, he may be given sufficient food for that day. So that was the written down positions as far as they were concerned. But that was their position. What I am surprised about is that the Indians picked up these positions very fast. Keshav Chandra Sen, and I think the 1801, 1870, that his journal started. And he, the first what's called issue of the journal, begin by saying that charity is wrong, giving free food is wrong, and people must work to eat food. And this I can hear till today. I can hear from very serious people saying that how can anything be given to anybody without work? You cannot make them lazy, you will not do this, you will not do that. So this somehow amongst the educated people of India, in fact, we were in school taught that at home it was usual, anybody comes begging, something will be given. But we were, as we learned further and further, we were taught that it is wrong to give to the beggar because it makes him more lazy. So this idea of associating the giving of food or giving of care, giving of shelter with the idea of charity, and then saying that charity is wrong, this has somehow got deeply embedded with the other Western habits we have got. This also we have learned amongst ourselves. But still, I think a large number of people I was hoping that if I was younger, when this major tragedy was occurring in India, I would have perhaps walked a few 100 miles with some people. And you would have seen that in many villages, people would have spontaneously taken care of these people. They were fed them food, given them food, they were given them shelter. This would have happened even now, even today.
I think the redeeming part about what emerged from the migrant crisis is that probably the practice is not completely dead, because we have seen
I'm sure this is not completely dead, but we are not good at recording these things. That in fact there are two major crises of this kind which have occurred in the 20th century that I know about. There was one major migrant movement in the 1930s from the Midwest to the California region in America. It was a very major movement of people, and a very great literature came out of it. Grapes of Wrath was written describing this and got Nobel Prize. There was similar movement during the many of the revolutions that occurred in Russia from 1905, 1917, and then Stalin's phase. And we have a book like Dr. Zhivago, which describes what happened from place to place, person to person. Here, of course, if we were that kind of people, that kind of literature we were writing, I'm sure that ordinary people would have gone out of their way to take care of these migrants in very systematic, very, very careful fashion.
Yes, the extent of ignorance is actually quite appalling, because I don't know how many Indians recall or know or have been told by their families of the artificial famine created by Churchill in Bengal during the Second World War, where millions died. So even that has been kept away from our view, that sort of deprivation was caused to our people as recently as the Second World War.
No, those they started from 1757, and they kept creating a famine every 10 years. So.
Yeah, so in terms of the advent of the British and their interference and jeopardizing our attitudes towards food and sharing food, and in terms of interfering with the way we controlled our water and irrigation systems, how soon is the decline from what we were to what we became?
In the 18th century, that area that we know, we don't know, different areas, different things would have happened. In the area we know, it was immediate. That, as soon as the British administration takes over, immediately the land under cultivation comes down, the land irrigated comes down, because there is no way this kind of system could have been maintained without a detailed networked allocation of resources.
Correct. So now, can we go back a little bit to, when we knew that India was a land of abundance, but you can also not anticipate the natural calamities like floods or lack of rain or a failed monsoon or a pest attack. So in these circumstances, despite abundance, what were the mechanisms in place by which the king ensured that his subjects weren't going hungry? Were there practices in place by which...
maybe I'm not very well read, but one doesn't come across, in the classical text that I've read, one doesn't come across description of this, except in the period of great decline that I just told you about in the beginning.
Okay.
Even only in that time this happens. But I tell you something else. We asked the same question you are raising, that there are famines, there are times of low production. What happens in a village when this happens? We asked this question from Kabul Singh, who was the secretary to Mahendra Singh Tikal. They are the leaders of the earlier, older panchayat system. We went to Kabul Singh's house in his village. We had the opportunity to ask him that question. And he said that, look, every village has a sethi. Sethi is the one who and he has he keeps the grain. And in case of famine, there is no way the sethi will not open his stores for everybody to take whatever it needs, whatever the village needs. And he was saying it with so much of confidence that we were really surprised. He says, how will it ever happen that whoever has been made responsible for keeping stocks of grains over time, when there's famine, there's a question of need, those stocks will be naturally opened up. And this will be, that kind of stocks will be everywhere. But that is of more recent times that we are talking about. Must have been famine in the classical times also. But
Not
very
necessarily
little is known.
famine as much as elements of nature that you cannot control, like a failed monsoon or a
So,
flooding. Or,
so this in this Ulavur village that I've just given you data about,
hmm,
clearly the first of this 5 years, the crops in the first 1.5 years seem to have failed.
okay.
But even then, the average of what I was giving you, the average of 5 years, even then that seems to be fairly high. So most functioning economies, most functioning polities, failure of 1.5 years in 5 years is a given. It
Okay.
happens and it is taken care of. It's even today it'll be happening and one takes care of. Because nobody can ensure that the nature will be good for every year in the 5 years. In fact, in agriculture, you never actually count 1 year's production. Whenever you want to have a long time series, you'll either take a 3-year running average, or you'll take a 5-year running average, because that's what is significant. And my feeling is, in general, in good functioning societies, 5-year running averages come out to be reasonably all right, as it was in the case of Colombo.
So time and again, you mention in your talks and lectures about India being a blessed land in terms of percentage of arable land.
Oh, you have read.
And
Okay. That
so,
that one is
so,
really extraordinary.
so,
The geography
yes,
that we have, geography that India
exactly.
has, well, maybe America, because it's such a vast land, in parts it will be equally rich. But India is blessed because we have sun the year round, and India is blessed that we have rivers in every part. We have abundant rains. We talk about scarcity, but we have abundant rains all over, and we have rivers. In fact, I have gone to so many villages. What defines any district is the river that passes through the district or is in the border of the district, and that's always sacred. Every river is sacred itself. Uh, People in the world uh, talk count how many days in a year the crops can rise. We do not count, because in India, 365 days in most of India are days when crops can grow. Uh, Most countries will count out of their total land which small parts where good agricultural production is possible. Say you take China, is only 1/3 of its eastern coastland where something can be grown. They do grow well, but the remaining 2/3 is a wasteland. We have no wastelands. All of India is the mainland, and everywhere you can grow enough for the people that are there. In fact, when we were doing the Annam Bahu Kurvita, I went to Ayodhya, and we met one of the major swamis. I'll not name him now. And we explained this to him. He understood it in no time. We didn't have to teach it. In fact, in the afternoon, he took us to a katha and told the kathavachik there that this is the subject these people are dealing with. Today you have to do the katha on this. And that person did katha on that. So he told us that, uh, this land is called Bharatvarsha because it has the capacity to bharana of everybody. That any number of people come here, they can be, their bharana is possible here. That is why it is Bharatvarsha. And he said, you keep on putting labor here, you keep on getting what you want. There is no limits that the gods have put on the Indian lands.
So considering the plains actually go from the far west to the east, did the British have a role in actually dismantling the agricultural practices of UP, Bihar and West Bengal, and thereby not give us the food that we can actually grow there?
Uh, somebody should study this history, and it is largely known that the plains of Ganga plains were the political heartland of India. Just as they are the economic heartland of India, they are also the political hand of India. And much of the protest against the British rule would have necessarily come from this. And from the records, it seems that it was almost a defined policy. I've not seen written records of this, right? That no input should be made in improving agriculture in this area. The agriculture was to be improved in areas outside the mainland of India. So much of additional agriculture irrigation that was created in British times would be in West Pakistan. And in fact, after partition, this was one of the major issues in India because much of the irrigated land had gone that side. And the total production of this area was much less. So you created, in fact, a large number of Punjabis moved to that area because new agricultural lands were opened, new irrigation was done. A large number of people went there. And the land of Ganga and Jamuna has been left largely unattended. But then we have not corrected it yet. Because when we were doing this kind of work, we used to talk to each other. And one other thing people talked about was that more you irrigate in the Ganga belt, the more water you get. Because if you take out water during the flood season, more water will get absorbed.
Yes.
So that you have not been doing that, and from our planning people, we have been hearing that these lands have been producing for so long, these have got tired, as if land actually ever gets tired. But you are right, there is an issue with, if you could set the Ganga Yamuna belt, actually, if you could set the Eastern UP, Western UP, Eastern UP, Bihar, Jharkhand,
Yes.
Bengal has somewhat started improving. If we could get these three states right in terms of agriculture, we will be a much richer country.
Which brings to the last two questions I wanted to ask you. And one is, of course, the Indian agricultural scenario post-corona. And as a consequence of what has happened with the pandemic, you have reforms that have been announced. And as you rightly pointed out, the reforms are focused at higher pricing and better distribution and freedom to farmers to get more money. But the focus is not production. So again, the model that we employ for increased production should not be faulty. It cannot be, we have to have a much more critical eye on the Green Revolution and to see what exactly it did deliver or did not. So what would be your input in terms of a post-COVID scenario and the reforms in the sector that have been announced, especially because we know we have the potential to increase production, which has not been looked at.
Post-COVID, I will, two issues are extremely important. One that, and this was known to some extent, one is that Indian society has become highly atomized. There are really no collectivities left in the country. Only state is the only collectivity we can rely upon. So what happened during the COVID was that every action had to be, every activity had to be addressed to the police. There was really no other functioning collectivity in the country which could rise to the occasion and do something about it. I'm told that where the panchayats were doing better, say in Karnataka, where the panchayat system is said to be stronger, and to some extent in Kerala, where panchayat, they were able to handle this issue much better. than the rest of the country. When the rest of the country, the only collectivity we had could take recourse to was the organized police forces of the country. So one of the suggestions would be that we do something serious about uh, recreating, reinvigorating various kinds of collectivities in the country. And one of the ways of doing this will be to, and this is very dear to me, is to start large-scale Annadana organizations wherever possible. One of the simpler ways of doing this will be that you allow anybody, any organization, any temple, any NGO, any church, any mosque, any caste organization who want to undertake the feeding of people. Let the government provide grain part of it to them from the PDS system. And let them, the rest they should take care of, both the question of organization and question of cooking, they should take care of. In fact, this is very possible in India because India now in the PDS system, I think 1/3 of what we produce is being distributed through the PDS system. So almost 2/3 of the people of India are beneficiaries of PDS system. So about 70 million tons, 60 to 70 million tons is what we distribute. If about 30 million tons of that is converted to cooked food through this kind of organizations, that will have a much more direct impact on the hunger. And more than that, it will reinvigorate the various organizations. Once they do this kind of activity of feeding large number of people, they'll also be able to do various other activities within the society. So that is one thing which I will strongly recommend, that we convert our part of our PDS into a way of distribution of cooked food through a state society participation. So the state provides the grain, the society provides the cooking and the labor and the organization. This will enrich both the society and the state. And if this were kind of organization were there, the kind of problem we had now would have been taken care of much more easily. And then there was a second question you had. One was this. I was. You remember what you?
Yes. No. Yes. So one is of course to feed the immediate hungry.
Okay.
But what
the
about
other is which
production.
the state is worried about, that the agriculture should be improved, and our simple formula from the beginning has been that if we are producing 200 kg per capita per year today, the day we start producing 300, we will not have hunger. The day we start producing 400, we can start counting ourselves amongst the developed nations of the world. But till you are at 200 kilograms per capita per year, you are at a point where most of the people of this country have to be worried about where the next meal will come from. Till that question is not taken off the table, a society doesn't become a developed society. And the only way that question can be taken off the table is by taking this 200 to 300 at least, but actually only when you reach near 400, that this question becomes irrelevant in a society. Most of the countries, developed countries, were in our kind of situation, developing countries, maybe about 30 years ago. Indonesia would have been like us, Thailand, Vietnam, China, of course. China was worse than us. All of them, when they began developing in the modern sense, all of them have raised per capita production to the levels that we are talking about. The kind of initiatives that are coming, the APMC being one, are not designed to increase food grain production beyond this 200 kg per capita per year. They're designed to increase the income of the farmer, maybe make his life better. But they are not designed to increase per capita availability of food beyond what it is today. And unless we change our policies to direct them towards handling this issue. Now the question is, what will be the technologies through which this will be done, the production will be increased? It's a difficult question, but it's a question which is a practical question. That we know that if you want to double production, you cannot be producing double the chemical fertilizer that you use today. Okay, so there will have to be innovative technologies worked out, but those have to be worked out from place to place, region to region, and it's always possible to do it. Agriculture is a decentralized activity. It's not something which can be at a centralized fashion. You cannot find one way of doing it. In fact, the Green Revolution wanted to do that, to find one way of doing this. So they ended up by, out of 600 or so districts, they ended up by selecting only about 60 to begin with, and 100 later where they could do it. If you want to increase production in all the 600 plus districts of India, then there will have to be a very large number of diverse technical inputs, diverse ways of doing this. But that is something which we need to begin doing, which we certainly need to begin doing. Unfortunately, we have not for almost 30 years now been able to convince the state or the society that this is a serious problem that we need to tackle.
We have in turn been given a false sense of security that we are self-sufficient in food grains. But if we keep the benchmark of 200 kilos per person per year...
Self-sufficiency in the sense that we don't import, but we have never imported too much food, except there were 2-3 years when we had to import in the 60s, the late 60s. But you ask any agricultural economist of the world, any across the world, not an Indian, he'll never tell you that 200 kilogram per capita per year makes any society self-sufficient in food. It is technically impossible to make that kind of claim. In fact, now that you're asking, in that seminar that we held in the Parliament House Annex, the Atal Bihari Vajpayee was there, I said. And he told us this story, that when he was in 70s, he was the minister in the Union. He went to Russia and to the Secretary General in Russia, he said we were meeting him, and he actually used this term that I made the error of telling him that we have become self-sufficient in food. And he said he talked to me for 2 hours to tell me what self-sufficiency in food means and why you are not self-sufficient. And this Vajpayee knew. He was told by a senior statesman of the world that this is what self-sufficiency.
So we are in need of a redefinition of what is self-sufficient. We need to look at the people on the street, and that should be our reality rather than figures somewhere. So this has been an extremely enlightening talk, Dr. Bajaj. I'm so glad I got this opportunity to talk to you. There's lots more that needs to be discussed, but I think we have the time for this much. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
And hope